I'm Professor Steve Rowe. I'm a real paleontologist, and you're watching Real Paleontology. And today in my Super Predator series, we're talking big cats. Specifically, we're going to look at a very successful genus of big, very sharp-toothed cat, Homotherium. Now, Homotherium is interesting for a bunch of reasons, not least of which being that in a number of respects, it's more dog-like than cat-like. A supersized cat-dog, so to speak. So, in this episode, our main question is, what do these peculiar features mean with respect to this cat's predatory behaviour in light of the most recent evidence? And talking recent evidence, I need to highlight a very exciting new find that is literally hot off the press. Just yesterday, this paper was published describing the mummified remains of a Homotherium cub retrieved from 32,000-year-old Russian permafrost. This is an absolutely wonderful discovery, the kind that we paleontologists dream of. It's thought to have been around 3 weeks old when it died. It definitely helps us tie the Homotherium story together. More on this later. A bit of backstory up front. Homotherium is a member of the scimitar-toothed clan. Their closest relatives are the dirk-toothed species such as Smilodon. All Homotherium have large, serrated upper canine teeth, although they are not as large as those of Smilodon. The first species of Homotherium was described from European material back in 1846, and since then they've been found in Africa, Asia, North America, and some say South America. All species are found within deposits ranging from around 5 million to 10,000 years in age. Now, this South American connection is clearly contentious. It hinges on the classification of this species described in 2011 as Homotherium venezuelensis. However, if we follow the advice offered in two recent papers, including this just published a few weeks ago by Manzuetti and colleagues, this species falls within a separate genus, Xenosmilus. The first species of Xenosmilus here, Xenosmilus hodsoni, was described back in 2001 from North American material. It's a very curious beast and well worth an episode in itself. Anyway, I'm going to accept this recent reclassification, at least in part because things will just get too darn complicated if I don't. So, there is no Homotherium in South America, but this South American scimitar-toothed cat probably evolved from it. Okay, back to Homotherium. Where does this bad boy sit in the cat family tree? Well, based on DNA data published by Pagemans et al. In 2017, scimitar-toothed cats split away from dirk-tooths like Smilodon around 18 million years ago. And according to Jiangzhou and Friends 2022, the species of Homotherium all fall here. There is debate, however, over just how many species exist within the genus. On the basis of their DNA evidence, Pageman suggests that all late Ice Age Homotherium should be considered as one species. Also, incidentally, as you can see, the two species of Xenosmilus are clearly descended from Homotherium stock here. Right, now, what makes Homotherium so distinct from other cats? And what does this mean in terms of its hunting behavior and ecology? Well, overall, as described by Mauricio Anton in this 2022 publication, in terms of its postcranial anatomy, relative to most other cats, it had a long, powerfully muscled neck and a short back with a pretty stumpy little tail. And I'm going to pay homage to Mauricio here, partly because he's done some great science on Homotherium, and partly because he's a gifted paleoartist, and I'm using a lot of his reconstructions here. Anyway, another standout feature of Homotherium is its dew claw, which is on the digit equivalent to our thumb. It is huge and fully retractable, but its remaining four claws were only semi-retractable and relatively small. Its forelimbs, although relatively long, were also relatively slender or gracile, and its elbow was less flexible. Its relatively short hind legs gave it a bit of a sloping back. Some earlier researchers proposed that it stood flat-footed on its rear limbs, but it's now pretty clear that it stood on its toes, as do all living cats. Many researchers have concluded, based on this evidence, that Homotherium was a bit of a distance runner. And interestingly, based on recent molecular data, Barnett et al. 2020 here found evidence of positive selection for genes that favour and improve endurance. Another bit of recent work of general interest here by Mauricio Anton posits that with its mouth closed, those big canines of Homotherium would not have been visible. Kind of your original North American concealed carry kind of beast. Now, of course, much of this interpretation thus far is educated guesswork, particularly regarding muscle anatomy. But this wonderful new mummified specimen just described by Lepatine and friends gives us the opportunity to fact-check such predictions. And I'm sure that Mauricio Anton will be very pleased to hear that his meticulous reconstructions of the musculature of Homotherium were right on the money. Of particular interest here, comparisons with a lion cub of around the same age leave no reasonable doubt that Homotherium had a tremendously powerful neck. Anyway, many of the features we've discussed so far clearly suggest that Homotherium would have been far better adapted to efficiently maintain speed over distance than any other cat before or since. In short, unlike other cats, it appears to have been more of an endurance or pursuit predator than an ambush one, as are all living cats. But of course, as I've noted before, with any new adaptation, there is a cost, a trade-off, and the most obvious price to pay here is the loss of strength and mobility in the forelimbs, which would have definitely placed some limitations on its ability to grasp and wrestle with its prey. It also needs to be borne in mind here that although Homotherium was certainly a big cat, comparable in size to an African lion at up to around 190 kilos or so, on the other hand, it wasn't in the same league as the two larger species of Smilodon, which maxed out at 100 kilo greater than this or more. Okay, so what about its skull, the real business end of any cat, the bit that does the killing? What does it say about how it caught and killed its prey? Well, the most obvious difference here between Homotherium and living conical tooth cats is that it obviously had bloody big compressed and serrated upper canines, although not as extreme as those of Smilodon, around 4 inches long as opposed to 7 or 8. Nonetheless, these canines could certainly have done a great deal of damage to soft tissue and ripped through tough hide. On the other hand, they would have been more susceptible to breakage in contact with bone than any modern day cat, and bone would have been avoided. Analysis of tooth microwear and isotopes by Larissa DeSantis and colleagues here in 2021 confirmed this. So basically, biting into the back of the skull of its prey was not an option. Analysis of the biomechanical performance of the skull of Homotherium reveals similarities and differences with that of Smilodon, as shown in this paper by Figueredo and others. Another relevant point here is that the actual bite forces generated by both of these saber cats would have been relatively weak. To the best of my knowledge, no one has actually estimated the bite forces of Homotherium, but myself and colleagues have certainly done this for Smilodon in this paper here, and I go into it in some detail in this previous episode. But in short, Smilodon's bite was much lower than that of a similar sized lion. Now, if you look at the skulls of a lion, Smilodon, and Homotherium, we can see that in both the saber cats, the area bounded by the cheekbones and the rest of the skull, which would effectively house the muscles, is relatively small. And there's no doubt at all in my mind that, like Smilodon, the actual bite of Homotherium would have been relatively weak. In fact, I think it would have been weaker than that of Smilodon's. Anyway, Figueredo and colleagues conclude that Homotherium would have killed with a bite to the neck. They envisaged this as a kind of a cross between the clamp and hold throat bite of a modern day big cat, like the lion, which kills its prey through suffocation, and the rip-tearing canine shear bite to the throat of Smilodon, powered in large part by the humongous neck muscles. Smilodon's approach is thought to have killed quickly through massive damage to major blood vessels and or the windpipe. There seems to be consensus here that if you're going to try and apply this kind of throat bite, you first need to tightly restrain the prey, otherwise you're going to risk breaking those big but fragile canines. To counter this problem, as already mentioned, the second now pretty widely held interpretation is that because individual Homotherium lacked the forelimb strength and flexibility needed to fully restrain large prey by themselves, it was likely a pack predator. Again, a more dog-like than cat-like characteristic. In this scenario, a pack or pride of Homotherium could have brought down a large prey animal and then finished it off with bites to the neck. Interestingly, Barnett and friends found that genes favouring sociality were selected for in Homotherium. So what exactly is going on here? Frankly, although I'm in agreement with the general consensus that Homotherium was a social predator, I interpret these data a little differently. I don't think that Homotherium's attack mode was something intermediate between that of a lion and Smilodon. I think it was something very different. Let me explain. I strongly suspect that Homotherium lacked anything like the bite force required to sustain the kind of clamp and hold throat bite that a lion could. On the other hand, because its canines are only half as long as Smilodon's, each bite could not have done anywhere near as much damage. So, where Smilodon may have been able to kill a large prey animal with a single, precisely targeted bite into the animal's throat, severing major arteries and or the windpipe in a single action, I reckon Homotherium would have had to apply multiple tearing bites. Each bite could have caused deep wounds and blood loss in a large animal, but they were unlikely to result in the near instant death visited upon prey by a bite from Smilodon. Bearing all this in mind, here's my call on how it actually killed its prey. Acting as a team, applying multiple deep bites into soft and or tough tissue, the Homotherium pack would have accelerated the weakening of the prey animal in the course of the pursuit. Such bites could have been applied to the flanks or belly. Once the prey had been sufficiently exhausted, it could have been toppled, and multiple further slashing and ripping bites, facilitated by the powerful neck muscles, would have effected a relatively quick kill through blood loss, without the need for a clamp and hold bite, nor for the predators to get involved in a prolonged up-close and personal wrestling match. I think the members of the Homotherium pack would have repeatedly and rapidly lunged at the prey, tearing out chunks of flesh, both before and after it was brought down. I see this as more of a combination of a dog-like and shark-like attack mode than that of a typical living cat, and clearly quite distinct from that of Smilodon or any modern-day felid. So, which species were the unfortunate victims of this dog-shark-like attack mode? Well, one thing that all we pundits seem to agree on is that Homotherium specialised in taking big prey, and recent isotope-based data from a Texan cave, published by Larissa DeSantis and others in 2021, strongly suggests that it fed on large, open country grazing species, such as horses and bison. Moreover, an abundance of juvenile mammoth bones in this cave open the distinct possibility that Homotherium regularly preyed on the offspring of giants, at least in Texas. Where does Homotherium sit then in our super predator Hall of Fame? Well, I reckon it's right up there. There's no doubt that it was a hypercarnivore. It almost certainly regularly targeted prey larger than itself, and if we accept the consensus view that it was a social hunter, then it would seem highly unlikely that it had any natural predators. A couple of quick last points that come from examination of this extraordinary mummified specimen that we could never have established from looking at fossilized bones alone. It's clear that this individual was a cold-adapted animal. Its external ears are relatively much smaller than those of a similarly aged lion. The fleshy part of its feet are much broader, and they lack one of the large fibrous pads found in most living cats. This suggests that it wasn't just cold adapted, but well adapted to run in the snow. And of course, one last fact we now know for sure is that this particular species of Homotherium was a chocolatey brown colour, at least as a cub. Okay, I'll finish up here. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please like and subscribe. Let me know what you think and which predator we should look at next in the comments section. Cheers and have a great day.